Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. Our topic for tonight is changes following a likely Russian victory in Ukraine, part uh, uh, 22. Our specific focus tonight, okay, is going to be uh, what may be happening with respect to the introduction of, okay, a new currency for trading, okay, in the international system, specifically the BRICS currency. There is a BRICS meeting that is coming up in South Africa, I believe from August 22nd to the 24th. And I believe they will be discussing the new currency at that meeting. There's a chance, I think it may be a small one, that they will be ready to actually introduce the new currency at that important meeting. I should give a little background also. The BRICS organization, or coalition, okay, or group, uh, was started. It's been in existence now for some years. And it was started by Brazil, okay, by Russia, uh, by China, by South Africa, okay, the Union of South Africa, okay, and by India. Those are the five nations that the group is named after. The B is for Brazil, the R is for Russia, the I is for India, the C is for China, and the S is for South Africa. Okay, as the BRICS has worked out the details of their coalition for some time, and as parallel trends have taken place, like the growth of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, for example, and the closeness of the alliance of Russia, okay, and China, uh, and the Belt and Road Initiative, okay, the Chinese. Uh, there also has formed a movement of many other nations to join BRICS, and there are now something like uh, 30 to 40 nations interested, okay, in joining BRICS. I've just been joined by Dee Pierce, the host of Around the World with Dee and Friends, and my good friend, uh, okay, who joins me for every one of these shows. And
Yes, I've been watching Joe for a long time.
okay, and I'm very grateful to her for joining me. Okay, so uh, okay, there are now supposedly some 30 to 40 nations interested, okay, in applying. There are supposed to be 10 nations that have actually gone through the application process and that may be let into the BRICS, uh, okay, during the meeting from August 22nd to 24th. Uh, I don't think I can name the 10 countries right now, but I can say that one of these countries is likely to be Saudi Arabia, and another of these countries is likely to um, okay. I think the second of these is um, 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 actually Iran. So these two countries, in a not so distant past, are really bitter enemies. beginning to work together today, and both will probably be added to BRICS very, very shortly now. Okay, and a number of other nations have also applied. And as I said, there are supposedly 10 nations that that may come into BRICS fairly soon. Okay, now the BRICS nations have been developing plans to issue a new currency that will work for international trading. The members of BRICS will keep their own currencies for domestic trading, so they have the freedom of retaining their fiscal policy space. They can still be currency sovereigns, and they can join the BRICS, as well, because the new currency will be used strictly for trading internationally. And so that point is very important to think about when you're talking about the introduction of a new currency. It's not going to be like the euro, which has been in so many ways a failure. In terms of the euro, it became the currency of all the member nations, of the Eurozone, except for a few that have not yet quite made the shift over to the euro. So it's both used for international trading, and it's used for domestic fiscal policy purposes, as well. And in the case of the Eurozone, the fiscal freedom of the individual nations has been restricted by the Eurozone agreements, so they can run fiscal deficits of only up to 3% per year, which limits their flexibility in fighting recessions, and also depressions. And it's been very hard on many of the Euro countries because of this. For example, real hardship was suffered in Ireland, in Spain, in Portugal, in Italy, because they couldn't respond to the crash of 2008 to 2010 with strong fiscal policies, because they didn't have the leeway, under the Eurozone. And moreover, the European Central Bank was subjecting them to the policies of austerity with respect to interest rate hikes, as well. So the BRICS nations have learned from the example, of the Eurozone, that it would not be good for them to give up their currencies, domestic currencies. So they want to have some of the advantages of the Eurozone, but still retain their particular freedom. So the question arises, how will this be handled? And how will the BRICS currency actually establish its value? This question is important because one of the reasons why a currency is valuable but to the people who use it, is because the taxation that takes place in that particular currency drives the value of the currency. It's the primary factor actually driving the value of a currency. So one problem the BRICS nations are going to have, or the question that's going to arise, is how will they drive the value of the currency without being able to tax in that currency, because, of course, if all the nations stay as monetary sovereigns and are able to use the full benefits of fiscal policy, uh, then the people of those nations won't be taxed in the new currency. They will be taxed in their domestic currency, and they will also have the ability to run deficits in that particular currency. So a lot of us who have been watching development of BRICS and the acceleration of development as the Russians are proving in the Ukraine war, that they are solid, both from a military point of view and also from an economic point of view, because they've been very successful in repelling the effects of the sanctions that have been imposed by the West on them. So this war process has had the impact of accelerating de-dollarization across the world. And this has particularly been the case because the United States, in imposing sanctions on Russia, have simply stolen the fiscal reserves of Russia that existed in dollars. And they have simply refused to give Russia access to those fiscal reserves, which I believe are in the neighborhood of $300 billion. And they won't give Russia the access to the reserves that they earned and deposited with the United States in the form of treasury bonds, even though according to international law, those reserves clearly belong to Russia. But what the United States is doing in this instance is they're taking the reserves and they say they're going to use the reserves to rebuild by Ukraine after the war. This is completely in contradiction to international law, but more important, it's self-defeating from the standpoint of using the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency for the international system, because it's a major breach of trust. And it's the first time it's happened. It's a selective default. In other words, what they're telling the Russians is, even though we owe you the $300 billion, and even though the Constitution of the United States says that our repaying you what we owe you is mandated by the 14th Amendment, Section 4, still, we take it upon ourselves to basically steal your reserves and to allocate it where we think, it should be allocated to. So what this has done is the whole world is watching this. And what they're asking is, if the United States doesn't like our foreign policy, are we then likely to use to lose our reserves also? Will our treasury bonds suddenly be seized by the United States and used for another purpose because they don't like our foreign policy, because it disagrees with what the United States thinks we ought to be doing? So this strikes at the very heart of the use of the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency of the international system, because the U.S. has shown that they can't be trusted as a trustee of the reserves of other nations. So, this gets other nations to think, hey, it's not the case that investments in the treasury bonds of the United States are somehow neutral investments, because the foreign policy of the United States is no longer treating them in that way. They're using the reserve status of the dollar as a foreign policy tool to force other nations to conform to what they want to do, in foreign policy. So this has greatly accelerated the move to de-dollarization all over the world. The move existed before, but the seizing of the Russian reserves has been a key event that everybody has been watching, and they've drawn the conclusion that their reserves are not safe, in the hands of the United States, and that the world needs another reserve currency. And so the BRICS nations have been working on that project for some time now, because it's been apparent for some time that sanctions, which the U.S. has imposed on so many other nations, have been using the dollar, as well, to coerce other nations to conform, to what we here in the United States want. So the project, is years in the making now. I forget when it actually started, but it's got to be at least 5 or 6 years old. And the major nations have been working out the details of the new currency. And through discussions people have been having, some of the details are being. It's not appropriate to say that they're leaked, because a lot of the discussions have been public. There haven't been formal announcements. We don't know for sure of the shape of the new currency, of how it will be valued for purposes, of trading, but we have some hints. I posted a link to a stream that was recently done. It was an interview by Stephanie Pomboy, of Jim Rickards, who's a well-known authority in the currency area. He's an extremely bright guy, has encyclopedic command of knowledge, in various areas. I don't think he's completely kosher, but from an MMT point of view. But I think he probably still has a fair grasp on some of the details of what's going to happen with the new currency, and how they're going, to value it. So there have been rumors circulating for some time, that the new currency will be backed by raw materials, and in particular by gold. Sometimes people have talked about a market basket of raw materials, and sometimes they've talked about a market basket that's broader than that. But more recently, rumors are circulating that somehow the new currency is going to be based on gold, which raises very serious questions, because the gold standard, when the nations of the world, were all on it, was a failure. There was not enough gold, in the world to be had to give nations the flexibility they needed to fight a recession, okay, or fight a depression. It was hard to deficit spend when you were on the gold standard. So the question is, if you based a trading currency on gold, would that somehow would it constrain the magnitude of trading, okay, that would be able to go on? Okay, specifically, the value of the gold reserves, okay, in the world, in the whole world, are probably in the hundreds of billions of dollars. But the value of international trading, okay, is in the many trillions of dollars per year. So the question, okay, immediately arises: how can the hundreds of billions of dollars in gold in the world, but possibly back the trillions and trillions of dollars of trading that's now going on, and that will probably get even more intense and even greater in volume, okay, in the coming years? And so some have concluded, for example, Jim Rickards states, okay, in his video, which I linked to here, that it's impossible for gold, okay, or for any material, okay, to back, okay, but to back a currency, because but no nation or no combination of nations has a sufficient amount of gold to actually back a currency. And yet people have been speculating about the BRICS currency for some time, okay, and have been saying, okay, it's going to be based on gold. Okay, and perhaps even more to the point, there are many people who have invested in gold and who are speculators, okay, in gold, and who, of course, the media considers to be the authorities on gold, okay, in the gold market, coming out and making increasingly enthusiastic statements about how the world is going to go on to a new gold standard. And so they're conjuring up this idea that suddenly gold is going to greatly increase in value because the new currency trading of the BRICS nations is going to be backed by gold. Excuse me a second. And so you see some videos where there are people who, if they're not actually hawking gold, okay, in those videos, are making it quite clear that there's going to be a great expansion, okay, in the use of gold in order to back the trading, that's going on in the world. What Jim Rickards says instead, okay, is that what the BRICS people will be doing, and we'll find out more about this within, I guess it's within a week to a week and a half now, that they won't really be basing the currency, okay, on gold per se. It's not going to back the currency in the sense that you can go to a gold window somewhere and trade in your BRICS in return for gold bars. That was the old way of doing things under the gold standard. That's not what's going to happen, okay, in this instance. In fact, the BRICS currency will not be convertible to gold, okay, in that way. there may be some trading that goes on of BRICS currency for gold, in terms of the private markets. But you won't be able to go to any government that is a holder of BRICS, and demand from them the equivalent, in gold. That's not going to happen. So in what sense is it likely that gold is going to be, in back, of BRICS? Well, the idea behind this, and this is based, on Rickard's notion, is that the currency will be established, the value of the currency will be established with reference to gold and with reference to the gold market. For example, and let's say for purposes of this, we call the BRICS currency the BRIC. So there might be a definition, of one BRIC, as equivalent, not to a particular gold price, but to a particular weight, of gold. For example, one BRIC could be made equal, in Rickard's terms, to 1 ounce of gold. I think it might be more likely, that it would be made equal to 1 gram of gold or something like that. But that's not what counts here. What counts here, is the principle that there would be a correlation of the value of the currency, some quantity of the currency, to some weight, of gold. Now that correlation would not require that any nation have any gold, or that any nation go out, and buy gold. Nor would a nation or a series of nations have to create a market, in gold. As Rickards points out, there is already a market in gold and in currency trading for gold. And it's a very big market. It already exists. And it also exists with respect to the reserve currency, of the dollar. Specifically, the dollar has a specific value from the point of view, of gold, and that value is changing every day. There's no correlation to a specific value anymore. There used to be a correlation of it was $35 for an ounce, of gold. And before the international system went on the fiat currency standard, in international trading, if you had $35, then you could buy 1 ounce, of gold. And if you held an ounce of gold, then you could go to the gold window, in the United States and get $35, in return for it. There was an international value that UN's currency was pegged to in terms, of gold. And that value was not allowed to vary, in the international system. The U.S. bought a lot of gold, at that time, and it's used its gold to maintain that international peg. The BRICS nations are not going to do that. What they will do is that when they start off, they're going to look at the market for gold, and they're going to see what the value of that gold is, from the standpoint of the market. They might even look at the value in dollars from the standpoint of the gold market. And Rickards points out that the value right now is something like $1,970 per ounce. Okay, and okay, so the BRICS nations will use that to value one brick. But they're not going to do anything to keep that value constant. They're going to let that value float in relation to the market that exists between currencies and gold. So the value of one brick is established by reference to that market, but the value of one brick is going to vary from day to day and from hour to hour, depending on the dynamics, okay, of the gold market. Okay, so it's the market dynamics that are going to change the value of the brick, okay, from day to day for trading purposes. So that means that the individual nations that are trading, okay, in BRICS will simply determine how they will trade based on the daily and hourly value of BRICS, okay, in that particular market. So it's not going to really matter how much gold, okay, a particular nation has, or so the story goes. No particular nation is going to have to buy gold in order to participate. But the value of gold will simply be a measuring stick for the value of BRICS on a daily, okay, and hourly basis. So that's the basic idea on how they're going to establish the exchange rate, okay, of the brick. Hope that I've explained that in a clear way. Now, okay, if they go ahead with this, okay, as the basis, okay, for BRICS, you'll note a couple of things about this. Number one, the brick will be defined as a fiat currency because the value is not really based on any promise to redeem the currency, okay, in gold, okay, or anything else. But okay, a decision is going to be made by the BRICS nations by fiat, which will correlate the daily and hourly value, okay, of BRICS, okay, to a particular weight in gold. The weight, is not established yet. Okay, so so the point is, it will be a fiat currency, but it will be a fiat currency whose value will be determined by and constrained by, okay, the dynamics of the gold market. It will be a choice made to make this fiat currency subject to the dynamics of the gold market. The assumption in back of this, or maybe one of the assumptions, okay, in back of this, is that somehow the gold market will not be biased in any way. It will be a free, it will be a free market. It is supposedly a free market now, and it would remain, okay, a free market. And that market would be arbitrating the value of a brick at any point in time. But the fact of the matter is, I have to point out that in recent years, some nations have been buying up, a lot of gold and have been holding on to it. The nations thought to have the most gold in the world, okay, at this point, are Russia, China, United States, in terms of holding gold, and I believe that India is a fourth nation that is holding lots and lots, of gold. Oh, I think the Saudis also have quite a bit, of gold. Those are very few nations. When it comes to trading, in the gold market, if there are just a few nations that are dominant in that market, and those nations want to control the market, then they have the gold to actually manipulate the market. If they choose to spend that gold, to support a particular price for the BRICS, they would be able to do that. If they want to tank the price of the brick, then they could try to, sell a bunch of gold into the market. The point I'm making here is a simple one, that there will be certain countries that will have the power to manipulate this market for BRICS, the market value of a brick, because they own most of the gold, in the world. The point is made by Jim Rickards, that if the United States wants to get out of the box of not having the reserve currency anymore, it could try. Wait, I'm not explaining this correctly. Jim says that what the BRICS nations are banking on, the bet they're making, is that over time, the value of the dollar will fall compared to gold. Of course, the value of the dollar compared to gold has been falling for a long time. I mean, it started out at the $35 an ounce, then we went on a fiat currency system, and today it's $1,970 an ounce. So, it may not be a very big bet, to suggest that over a period of time that the value of the dollar relative to gold is going to continue to go down. That's certainly been the trend for a very, very long time now. But even though that's the long-term trend, we're talking about a market, and there are short-term trends, in this market. If you look at it from the point of view, of investors, gold was at a relatively low price, let's say in 2007 or 2008. Then it changed, and somewhere around, and I'm not really familiar with the total details of the market, I'm just talking about a graph that I recently saw. But in 2017, the value of gold compared to the dollar peaked. And then, it fell back again for a few years. And now it's reaching a peak again. The $1,970 price is a relatively high price for gold. So, if someone is interested in buying gold, okay, at this point, because they think that the new currency is going to be based on gold, and they figure, oh, if I buy gold and I hold gold, then, okay, I'm sure to make a killing. Well, that might not be the case because the currency won't really be backed by gold. Its value will just be determined by reference to gold.
Yeah, and that's the thing I've noticed. People, these different money people, they're always screaming for people to buy this, that, or the other thing. Right now, they're saying the dollar's falling, the dollar's falling. I told you a year ago this was going to happen. You better get and buy your gold now. Buy your gold.
You better buy your gold now, but your gold will not be convertible back to dollars or back to bricks by going to some kind of gold window. That, okay, is not going to happen. You're going to have to wait for the market dynamics. And from a local point of view, okay, the dynamics of the market sometimes are raising the price of gold and sometimes are lowering the price of gold. And if you're a small investor in gold who is not able to wait for the trend to turn or to wait for things to go your way, then the fact that gold is increasing relative to dollar, okay, in the long run may not going to help you in the short run, okay, at all. You might invest in the gold and find, oh, tomorrow uh, it's gone back to $1,910 an ounce, and maybe the day after that it's gone back to $1,870 an ounce, and maybe over a period of 6 months it goes back to $1,700 an ounce. And now you have the pressure to sell your gold into the market because you have some other obligations that you must meet. And here you are, you've lost $200 an ounce or something like that. That can easily happen to small investors. It can be very dangerous to speculate in gold if you don't have the financial wherewithal or the staying power, okay, to do that. The second point, okay, I want to make here is that, okay, if you do decide uh, that you do want to invest in gold on the expectation that more gold is going to be bought, okay, and that's going to raise the price of your gold, that somehow there's going to be more trading in gold. The fact that BRICS is establishing a currency with reference to the gold value of BRICS on an hourly and daily basis, it does not follow from that the market in gold is going to get increasingly dynamic, and that the value of gold is going to be up and up and up and up and up. There's no necessary expectation of that, because for the BRICS to use their currency as a trading currency, that doesn't have to happen. If they use it for internal trading, okay, in their block, it doesn't matter whether gold is up, okay, or gold is down, okay, or gold is increasing or gold is decreasing, or what, okay, the trend is. They're just looking for the reference to gold in order to price what a brick is going to be worth compared to other countries in the world for trading purposes. So there's no necessary sort of expectation that the gold market is going to go up and up and up and up and up. Maybe it will compare to the dollar, but maybe it won't compare to other currencies. Or okay, there's no certainty that the value of gold is going to go up quickly and represent a substantial return, let's say over the next 2, 3 to 5 months, or even 2, 3 to 5 years. So you have to be very careful about what people are saying in terms of working out the implications for the value of the BRICS currency, even in the short run. Okay, for the BRICS people, all that they're doing is valuing their currency in terms of gold, because they see gold as a proxy for a whole market basket, okay, of other materials and goods, and to some degree even services, that it's too complex for them to value and to create, okay, an index based on all these. It's much simpler to take the trends in gold just as a proxy, okay, for everything else. Well, why use gold then? In other words, why not, use the dollar? Because they don't want to use the dollar, because the United States, as the issuer of the dollar, is able to manipulate the value of the dollar, okay, in various ways. We're allowing the dollar to freely float, but that doesn't say that we're not going to use the dollar in some other way for foreign policy purposes at sometime in the future. The BRICS nations don't want, okay, the United States to have control of the market value, okay, of the BRICS. They're happy to have the BRICS currency actually float, okay, in international markets, so that it will be a freely floating currency. But they don't want, okay, the United States to have the chance to dominate that currency, okay, in any way. And I have to reply also that from the standpoint of the United States or any other nation, you don't want any of the BRICS nations to be able to manipulate the value of the BRIC currency, or whatever it's going to be called, from day to day or month to month, okay, or year to year. You want the situation to be, okay, a neutral one. And as I pointed out earlier, with the Indians having a lot of gold, and the Chinese have a lot of gold, and the Russians have a lot of gold, their large holdings in gold may give them a possibility of actually manipulating the market value of the BRIC over a period of time. Now, I suppose they will put forward various forms of guarantees saying they will not do that. They will never do that. They will be completely neutral. Okay, I have a disposition at this point to trust such statements, okay, on their part, because I think the Chinese have a pretty rigorous view that the value of the BRICS trading currency should not be manipulable by any one party, not even themselves. I have considerable faith in this. But over the long term, the only defense against the power to manipulate something based on gold is to disperse the gold across, okay, the nations, so that everybody has their share, okay, of the gold market, so nobody can dominate the gold market. But to make this happen, what would be necessary for the BRICS currency is for the major holders of gold in that currency group to disperse the gold to all the other nations in equal proportion to their population, using some kind of rule like that. You would need a fair and equitable distribution, okay, of gold to ensure that the larger countries would not be able to manipulate the value, okay, of the BRIC. So this is not something that was pointed out or even considered by Jim Rickards at this point. He was just fascinated with the idea. that they were thinking of basing the value of the brick on the weight, okay, of gold rather than pegging it, okay, to a particular price. And he was very enthusiastic about that sort of idea, and he attributed it to some Russian thinker because he thought only the Russians could think up such a thing. In other words, to base the value on a particular weight of gold that would be held constant, while the currency itself, of course, would have a variable value from hour to hour, okay, and from day to day. He just, loved that idea, and I think he thought it was attributable to some Russian master chess player, because the chess player, was figuring out a way to make the value of the bricks for trading purposes completely dependent on the gold market in such a way that if the United States were to try to manipulate it simply by buying more and more gold, then the result, okay, would inevitably be that the value of U.S. currency would continue to fall even faster. So that's what Jim thought was so fascinating about this idea. Uh, so I think this is a very interesting idea. I think it does actually set up the BRICS currency as an attractive trading currency. What I wonder about it, okay, is whether it doesn't introduce constraints on the quantity of that currency that can be issued, and whether those constraints would be serious enough to limit the amount of international trade that can go on. So that's what I wonder about it. I don't like the idea of constraints on fiat currencies that seem like, okay, they're arbitrary constraints. On the other hand, okay, I do recognize that there has to be a way to give a starting value to the BRICS currency, and that there has to be a way to let it float over time in a neutral way in response to trading. So the question is how you design a mechanism for that. And the BRICS answer, in part, also relying on Keynes and his thinking, is that you define the value of the currency with reference to gold. So what do you think of this, Dee?
I think it's quite interesting, and I know that they're looking at safeguards because they saw what the U.S. with no restraints on anything, and the whole neoliberalism, what it's done to people. So I think they're trying to look at it that it's done, and it's done in a safe manner that's respectful to everybody.
What are some of the safeguards you've seen them talk about?
Talk about the safeguards of whatever currency that country has, like not currency, but whatever their goods are, whatever their whether it's gold, whatever the country has that country uses.
In other words, safeguards
Well, that like a
in
country
terms of
doesn't fall under.
stopping imperialists from coming
Yes,
into those countries and exploiting the countries to get the raw materials out. So they want
Correct.
to put safeguards on that. But what
Hmm.
would be the specific kinds of safeguards they're talking about? Okay, I mean, I don't think there are safeguards in the currency itself. There must be political safeguards against this or economic safeguards against this. I suppose those would happen with the Belt and Road Initiative, for example.
Correct. Because I know early on I had read that whatever the source of whatever the resources of that country, that country would utilize to pay. Um, Instead of demanding that they use something that's not within their, I guess, their ability. They're trying to make the system a fair system.
Yeah, they seem to be trying to do that.
It's
Uh,
not easy to make it. It's not easy. But I know, like when we look at China, how China has things, and they've got regulations on certain things where you can't, where the U.S. doesn't go after bankers and people that have intention of robbing and manipulating somebody. I mean, they're looking at to protect, that protection where people aren't going to get screwed over, and it's not going to be that whole corrupt capitalism.
yeah, I'd like to know a lot more about the safeguards they have in mind for this. I would love to see such safeguards. Uh, um, from my point of view, they would be very important. It's basically safeguards to end the imperialism we see today. And
Right.
I think that is what we need. Okay, let's go to the comments. Okay, and see what we have. So Robert Copeland says, "What are the chances of BRICS success?" I think the chances of the success of BRICS are very, very high right now. And they are very, very high because we're not simply talking about the success, okay, of BRICS alone with respect to, okay, its own resources, but also the success, okay, of organizations like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the success of the Belt and Road Initiative, okay, uh, the success of the alliance of Russia and China, for the long pole, okay, the success of their foreign policies in Latin America, okay, in Africa. All these things are happening together. Uh, if a fair trading system is set up, okay, in BRICS, and a fair currency that cannot be dominated by any one party is set up in BRICS, then I see a lot more countries flocking to it. Uh, I think within a week or two, they're going to have 10 more countries that are going to join BRICS. Then there are supposed to be uh, 20 to 30 more countries waiting in the wings that, may join over the next year or two. So within 2 years, 40 countries will be a part, okay, of BRICS. They will probably represent a majority of the population of the world. Uh, Many of the economies will be very strong and powerful too, like the Russian economy. Oh, by the way, just something I heard today. New report was put out by the IMF. Okay, and the country which was called a gas station recently. Oh, that country's a gas station. Specifically Russia. Well, that country has now progressed, according to the IMF, from the 16th strongest country in the world from an economic point of view to the 6th strongest country, in the world. And that has happened um, only in the last year or so. That's a very striking change. And of course, it's due to the Russian efforts in the war, in Ukraine, to actually grow the economy to be supportive of the war. They've been very, very successful in doing that. Uh, so I think if you look at the whole big picture, including what's happening to the United States with its Ukraine proxy war, and what the likely failure is going to mean for the status and prestige of the United States, but other countries will be far less afraid of bucking the United States. We can already see this in Africa, where there's a trend but towards bucking the collective West. But with each passing day, we see the Africans getting more and more bold. And we see the pink tide in Latin America getting stronger and stronger also. And of course, the countries in Central Asia are developing more and more now based on the investments and trading coming their way from Russia and China, and India. I think that people, other countries, are looking, at the BRICS as a way to escape from the domination of the United States and the domination of the dollar system. And especially the developing countries, are looking at that because their economies over a long period of time have failed and failed and failed. And it's because of the system of supporting them, which was developed by the World Bank and the IMF. I mean, its financial support systems, for the developing countries have resulted in their being in perpetual debt. They don't want to have that sort of arrangement anymore.
Would that stop sanctions?
Well, what it would do is disempower the sanctions. For example, let's say that Argentina, which of course is trying to become a member of BRICS also, let's say that Argentina decides they want to default on their dollar-denominated debt. Normally, they would face extreme sanctions from the World Bank, and the IMF, and also face sanctions from court decisions, in this country, which would be very unfavorable to what they were trying to do. Previously, under the old system, there would be no recourse for Argentina because, they had, the dollar-denominated debt. They contracted for it, and their creditors in the U.S. system would be insisting on their paying for it. And they would have no other financial resources to turn to, if they defaulted. Now, why ought they to default? Well, in the case of Argentina, it is very, very apparent. They were taken over by some conservative governments, and the conservative governments were run by people who wanted to impose austerity, in Argentina. And they went to the World Bank and the IMF, and they negotiated loans that imposed conditions of austerity, on Argentina. And Argentina for decades has been in this box. At the beginning of the 20th century, it looked as though Argentina was going to become one of the most successful countries in the world. But they've been kept in a kind of financial penury by the arrangements of world capitalism all through this period of time. For them, the BRICS and their financial resources will provide, a way out. They'll be able to get loans, at very favorable terms, and they'll be able to say to the West, sorry, folks, we can't pay this. These debts were incurred by governments who were trying to keep our people, in poverty. We're different kinds of governments. We are socialistic governments now, and we want to do what's right for our people. And what's right for our people is we do not pay you back. And we don't have to pay you back now because we can turn to other financial sources. So we're going to develop under the guidance of these other financial sources, and we're going to finally realize the potential of our currency, and our nation and our resources. And if you don't like it, then the only thing you can do about it is to bring force to bear. Now, 15, 20 years ago, the United States, and the UK would bring force to bear and, force Argentina to comply. But if Argentina, is a member of the BRICS and part of the Belt and Road Initiative, and has also certain agreements with the Russians and Chinese, it's not going to be so easy for the United States and the UK to do that sort of thing anymore. In other words, we've got a real shift in world power taking place. And Western countries may just have to have their businesses, their banks, and their hedge funds may just have to suffer from defaults. And by the way, that wouldn't be a bad thing from the standpoint of the United States and its people either. Because these bloodsuckers are just pure vampires that don't do a bit of good for the people of the United States, but just accumulate these billions of dollars by milking the debts of other countries inside of Latin America. Now, the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the other organization started by the Russians and Chinese, they're creating a new world of institutions that can free up the nations that have been basically imprisoned by the Western institutions. Robert Copeland said, I heard that the ruble is in big trouble right now. I don't think that's true, Robert. I think it's Western propaganda. I don't think the ruble is in any kind of big trouble because the ruble is a fiat currency. I know the financial management in Russia is very conservative, much more conservative than it has to be. But there is some MMT thinking that has gotten in there. And there's no currency problem with the ruble. But Russia is a monetary sovereign. How can the ruble be in big trouble? If you're saying it's downgraded, in international circles, I just don't see it. The international price of rubles compared to other nations now appears to be stabilized. As far as Russia saying that Ukraine can't join NATO, they have no say in what Ukraine or any other can do. That's not true, Robert. They do have a say. Now, of course, on the assumption that nations are equally sovereign, They should have no say. But the fact is that Russia has rights to look after its own security the same way Ukraine has rights to look at, okay, its own security. And when those things come into conflict, then things have to be settled in such a way that there are no security threats for either country. Russia has been offering Ukraine for years a security framework, but that security framework can't possibly include the joining of Ukraine, okay, and NATO, because NATO is a hostile alliance, okay, to Russia. And Russia simply can't have those NATO missiles inside of Ukraine where Moscow can be reached in 5 minutes. That is not a viable security arrangement for Moscow. And you can be sure that if Canada, let's say, were to join a hostile alliance, that we in the United States would never allow it, in spite of the fact that Canada has the formal right to join any alliance they care to join. The same goes for Mexico. We will use our military power to prevent either of these countries from joining alliances that are hostile to us, because hostile weapons in either country would represent an existential threat, okay, to the United States. So you have to remember that even though each nation is ideally equal to any other under international law, that doesn't take into account the differences in population, okay, the differences in power, okay, and the differences in nations' rights to national security. In other words, countries that are much larger and have far more people to keep safe simply have deeper rights to national security than relatively smaller countries with fewer people. Okay, on the assumption that the people of each nation have an equal right to security. And if you have more people, okay, in your nation, okay, then obviously you have a heavier right, okay, than other nations. I think the same thing applies to China. Same thing applies to India. They are huge countries with 1.4 billion and 1.5 billion people in them. Those people have a very, very heavy right to be kept safe by international security arrangements. We have a very large country also with 340 million people in it, 335 million people, whatever the figure is right now. And because we have so many people, then we have a greater right to national security than other people that who live, okay, in other nations do. So I don't think Ukraine has the right to join any alliance that it cares to if the exercise of that right interferes with the right to national security of the people of Russia. So there's that. Evelina says the larger countries can start by returning the gold They've stolen from the smaller countries. Good point, Evelina. The UK comes to mind with more gold than uh, almost more reserves than anyone. No, I don't think the UK has as much gold at this point as Russia, China, the United States, or India. I don't think it has comparable gold. Including 22 tons of Venezuela's gold they have sequestered and 11 tons of Argentina's. Well, I'm with you there. Those should certainly be given back to their respective countries because the UK had no right to sequester those resources. No right at all, according to international law. Not to mention the gold being extracted from other countries in the region, such as Peru from time immemorial. I agree, completely agree with that. I also think that Mexico, over many centuries, was robbed, okay, of its gold, as I think you know. Or is it sequestered? I think the gold of Venezuela was sequestered on request from the United States. I think we asked the UK to sequester the gold. And by the way, the sanctions that we have enforced, okay, in Argentina, including the sequestration of the gold, have cut greatly into the medical imports that have gone into Venezuela over a period of time. And the estimates are that 50,000 people have died because it was impossible for Venezuela to get its hands on its gold reserves. Argentina paid the IMF in 2011 during the Kirchner administration. Then Macri came along and incurred the present debt. Okay, but also the debt, okay, of Argentina was bought by some of the hedge funds for pennies on the dollar in 2010, okay, in 2011. And then the hedge funds have tried to extract payments from Argentina since then by going to court here in the United States and getting favorable judgments. And then they've been able to exert pressure in Argentina to extract some payments from it. Yes, then Macri came along. That's who I was referring to when I said governments came along that wanted to impose austerity, okay, in Argentina. It's also not simply austerity in Argentina, but the conservative governments in Latin America have been very corrupt. So they've been siphoning off the financial wealth of Argentina and Venezuela and other countries while they enrich themselves. The people in these regimes have had personal incentives to enrich themselves while impoverishing the rest of their country. And Evelina says, which, by the way, the actual government has every intention of paying part of it with the yuan via swap. Well, that would be very good. And by exporting gas from the pipeline, which has never been completed, that too would be good. Robert Copeland says, what about Ukraine's rights to its own security from larger nations like Russia? Well, Robert, Russia offered to Ukraine a security framework in the form of the Minsk I and Minsk II treaties, which Ukraine agreed to and then failed to enforce, which was the proximate cause of the wars we're seeing today. Russia offered to Ukraine a viable security agreement that would have been honored by Russia. But what happened was that Ukraine refused to enforce those agreements and instead started a war against the Russian population, okay, of their own country. So Russia was prepared to guarantee the security rights, okay, of Ukraine, and did guarantee it in those treaties. All Russia wanted was for Ukraine to agree to stay neutral, not become a part, okay, of NATO. And also, of course, they had to agree not to oppress the Russian populations of their country. Those were the two main conditions. But Ukraine's government thought that they could cast aside that signed agreement, the Minsk II agreement, which had been guaranteed by France and Germany, by the way. They thought it was better for them to go with the United States promises, which were promises to support them, okay, in a military conflict with Russia, and promises to arm them, which the West did from 2014 to the start of the war in 2022. They built the largest army in Europe, with the possible exception of Turkey, which of course is mostly in Asia. But the largest army in NATO historically was Turkey's army. And Ukraine built up an armed force larger than Turkey's, with the reserves and everything else. When this war started, they had 750,000 people they could call upon. Now, 400,000 of those people are dead, thanks to the fact that the Ukraine government would not enforce the Minsk agreements, which they agreed to. Robert says, Spain stole the most gold from South America back a few hundred years ago, and a lot of that gold is on the ocean floor. Well, some of it is on the ocean floor in the form of sunk ships. Germany and Japan stole a lot of treasure from other countries during World War II. Russia had attacked other countries over a decade ago, like their attack on Georgia, but I'm not aware that they looted any of Georgia. They certainly attacked Georgia, and they brought Georgia into line with their own security needs. By the way, Georgia at that time was also fixing to join NATO, which again would have been intolerable to Russia. Anyway, I thank you all for coming. I think that's all for tonight. Have we done it for tonight?
I think so. I think we
Okay.
covered a lot.
We should remind everybody to buy us some coffees and to occasionally visit my Patreon account. And also, you see The Buy Me a Coffee address of Dee Pierce is right after her name. And my banner from buymeacoffee.com is scrolling across the bottom. And from Evelina, we have the comment, actually, British pirate ships stole a lot of Spain's stolen gold. Oh, yes, the privateers in the 16th century. Yeah. So, okay, we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, I'll have a Dump the Corruption show tomorrow. Okay, and Dee will have an Around the World with Dee and Friends show tomorrow. I don't know what the subject of that will be. In
I'm
fact,
thinking maybe we can discuss the Chris Hedges article.
okay, I didn't see Chris Hedges' article, so that'll be interesting.
Yes.
Okay, Chris Hedges has a new article.
Well, it's on RFK Jr.
Oh, another new article on RFK Jr. Okay,
Yes, his analysis. It's very good.
I'm sure it is. Good. I think we'll have a real good time discussing that tomorrow.
Yes, we will. I'm sure we will.
Okay,
8 p.m.
thank you,
Eastern time.
everyone. Huh?
I said 8 p.m. Eastern time.
8 p.m. Eastern time, and my Dump the Corruption show is at 9 p.m. Eastern time.
Yes.
And we both are on each other's shows, as we will be
Yes, we
tomorrow.
are.
So everybody have a great night.
Yes,
And
Evelina says sounds good, Dee. Yes. Thank you, Evelina. It's going to be a good show tomorrow night.
we'll see you tomorrow.
Yes.
I
Good
hope you
night. And good
enjoyed
night,
this
Bonnie.
show.
Yes, a lot of good information. Good night. Let me get out.
Robert Copeland says a lot of the privateers were employed by countries like England. Indeed, they were. Indeed, they were. They were employed specifically by the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth I. Ah. Oh, thanks, Evelina. And you don't need to call me doctor. You can just call me Joe. Anyway, everybody have a great night.